Shalom from Jerusalem. This is TV7's Israel at War update. And as we continue to deliberate the latest from Israel and the Middle East, it's always important to remember that 129 days ago, the Islamist terror groups from the Hamas-plagued Gaza Strip launched an onslaught on southern Israel, declaring war by perpetrating a massacre, murdering some 1,200, mostly civilians, wounding over 4,800 others, and kidnapping 246 people, including elderly, men, women, and children, as well as infants, 134 of which remain in Hamas captivity to date. Let's now turn to our TV7 editor-at-large, Mr. Amir Oren. Amir, mixed feelings today, both happy news as well as sad news. What can you tell us about it?
Indeed, when Israelis woke up this morning, this was exactly their response. Mourning because two commando soldiers fell in battle yesterday in Gaza, in the Khan Yunis area, and two Israeli hostages were rescued in Operation Golden Hand from an apartment in Rafah early this morning, a few minutes before 2 a.m., in a daring operation by a special hostage rescue team, which belongs to the Israeli National Police, the Yamam unit, and they were supported by the Naval Flotilla 13, Naval Commando unit, and an armored brigade. So, of course, by the Air Force, both bombing in the area and then helicopter whisked away the hostages and the rescuers side to Israel proper, to a hospital. Many of the captors were killed, as well other Gazans in the surrounding buildings. Now, another important news today, but apparently less than advertised, came from the Netherlands, where the Supreme Court barred the government from sending some replacement parts for the F-35 to Israel. Now, as it was reported in Europe, these were products of Dutch industries as part of the syndicate, the multinational syndicate producing parts for the F-35. But it turns out that this is not really so. This is only a depot which serves Europe and the Middle East out of the United States. It is held by the Lockheed Martin Corporation. It can be easily circumvented by sending, airlifting all of these parts from the United States. It may be a little more expensive, but there will be no impact on the operations of the Israeli Air Force, and it will probably taken on a government-to-government basis, especially since the Prime Minister of the Netherlands happens to be in Israel today.
Indeed. I think also with regard to the F-35 components that we're talking about, naturally it also puts the Netherlands in a very tough position with regard to its agreements with Lockheed Martin, as part of which everyone partaking in this F-35 program, which is a multinational program, has a certain component which it manufactures respectively. Such was also the case, of course, with the wings by Turkey, which when it procured the S-400, naturally it lost its claim to the program due to U.S. considerations of interoperability between Russian-manufactured weaponry and that of NATO members, and naturally that cannot interoperate together, since it would constitute certain breaches. And therefore, in the Netherlands, from what I hear coming out of The Hague, there are currently significant steps being made in order to once again appeal this decision by the court in the Netherlands. And within the Dutch constitution, international agreements and treaties have precedence over local rulings and decisions, and therefore there are different decisions that can be taken in order to bring it within, of course, Dutch national security interests, which is the case just here. Let's now turn to the commander of the Israeli Air Force Task Force for Air and Missile Defense, namely Brigadier General in Reserve Doron Gavish. It's good to see you, General. I'd like to ask you particularly about the operation, but more broadly, where are we currently in the Gaza Strip? We're hearing Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu highlighting time and again that victory is within reach. What does that actually mean?
Well, Jonathan, maybe we really have to start with, and Amir, I think, mentioned almost all the units that took part on this operation during the night. Of course, on this, I think we have to go back first to the goals of this war, and we talked about it more than once, that there is this tension between, from one hand, to fight against the Hamas and to be in a point the Hamas is being dismantled from his military capabilities and won't be anymore the ruler of the Gaza Strip, and then from the other hand, the hostages and the release of the hostages. And we see this tension again and again and again. Of course, there was a big debate in Israel. There is quite a debate in Israel against the deal with the Hamas and what exactly would be the terms of this deal. But we see that at least within the military sphere, there is no question. The military is basically working in both efforts, the Hamas and the release of the hostages. And this is what we saw today or tonight with the release of those two hostages. What does it mean? It means that the IDF is continuously dealing with this mission. In order to release them, it is not something that you built in a matter of 1 hour. We saw something and let's go for it. This is a well-planned operation with special forces. They didn't have too much time, but they still had to plan themselves to this mission. This was a mission in the area which is Rafah. It is not controlled yet by the IDF, which make it much more complicated. So of course we could there is a satisfaction over there, but we still all remember that we have another 134 hostages which are over there. So the main mission of the IDF is still to press the Hamas to try to release as much as we can hostages, but it is mainly to press the Hamas and to bring him hopefully to a point that the negotiation would be such that Israel would be able to continue with his goals, but also to release those hostages. The other strategic point from the military, I would say, point of view, of course, it's the Rafah. It looks like this would be the next stage. It is much more complicated because we know there are political dimension to it, mainly with the Egyptians, and this is something that Israel would have to take in consideration before operating in this area. But there is no question that this should be the next step of the IDF, because as we see, the hostages, some of them are there, and probably a lot of the Hamas leaders are already in this area. So when we are talking about victory, we are talking about the two main goals that we discussed about, and we still have some time to go there. But Israel is continuously working, I would say, toward those goals.
Thank you, General Gavish. Let's now turn to our next distinguished guest, namely Brigadier General in Reserve, Dr. Amnon Sofrin, formerly the Chief of the Intelligence Directorate at the Mossad Intelligence Agency. It's good to see you, General. I'd like to ask you particularly about the Israeli calculus when we're talking about the hostages, since there is a lot of effort being currently invested into this challenge that, as General Kavish mentioned, 134 hostages, including infants, including little children, including women, men, and elderly, are still being held in Gaza by the Islamist Hamas. And it seems like there is no international push in a manner that would be truly satisfactory and pressure Hamas to succumb to Israeli demands and those of the United States, Qatar, and Egypt at this point.
I don't agree with what you said because I know a little bit other facts. First of all, Hamas gave back his answer and their response to the equation that was generated in Paris about 2 weeks ago. And of course, he set a very, very hard line. That means that he said, okay, I'm willing to go for 45 days, and 45 days of ceasefire, and to release, first of all, the elder people, women, and others. Later on, all the young men, meaning soldiers mainly, female and male, and in the end, the bodies of people that have been killed and being held in Gaza. Part of them out of October 7 that were kidnapped and brought back to Gaza. Now, Egypt and Qatar are trying very hard now to ease the terms of Hamas in order to get together tomorrow morning at a meeting in Cairo, which will be headed by Bill Burns, the head of the CIA, and he's not coming here for a tour and just for sitting and negotiating. That means something should be done. And the decision in Israel is that the Israeli team will go there only if the Egyptians and the Qatarians will signal to Israel that the terms are being more soft, more easy, more tangible to be handled by the Israelis. That means it's something that can be dealt and not something that is non-starter. And only that, if it happens, the Israeli team will go to Cairo as well and join this meeting. So I believe there is a pressure on Hamas. I know that the Egyptians said to Hamas that if within 2 weeks you don't ease your positions, Israel will go and begin attacking Rafah. And that's kind of a threat, even though the Egyptians doesn't want us to go into Rafah, but they use it as a tool to threaten Hamas and to apply pressure on Hamas. So I believe that something is going to move tomorrow morning. I hope so. And only by the pressure that comes from the United States, from Egypt and Qatar.
With that being said, of course, when I'm referencing the international community, I'm speaking beyond the bounds of the United States, Egypt, and Qatar, which are obviously very, very keen on realizing such an agreement. Nevertheless, I'd like to ask our next guest, namely Colonel in Reserve, Dr. Anan Wehebe, formerly a senior officer at the IDF's Intelligence Directorate, amongst others, and currently at the ICT at Reichman University. It's good to see you, Colonel. I'd like to ask you particularly about the calculus regarding Rafah. When we're talking about this border town, half of which or part of which is in Gaza, the other part is in Egypt, it seems like the population currently being there in the last bastion of Hamas, the last stronghold which it controls, even though its control is still questioned with all of the various challenges related to that. What is the calculus on the Israeli side in order to achieve its objectives, which are more clear than those of Egypt, which is more concerned about the consequences of what may happen to the civilian population, as well as that of the United States, of Jordan, of other countries in the region who have been quite vocal in their objection to Israeli ground maneuver into this territory?
Yes, thank you. So we can see that now the IDF have already reached the southern part of the Gaza Strip. And here is the majority of the population in this strip are located right now there. Part of them, or most of them, are considered concentrated in the big camp there. Actually, Israel says that it has to complete the control, the military control of the whole area. Otherwise, we cannot stop the fight. Where in Hamas there are still 4 battalions, they're acting in Rafah. We have to complete the control to decide those forces, and then to talk about the day after. This pushes, of course, us towards the Egyptian borders, where it's a bit sensitive for the Egyptian army, that they are taking into consideration a scenario that they may be part of the civilians will try to pass the borders towards Sinai, where they are trying to avoid that. Militarily, they are trying to avoid that politically. And Israel is talking to the Egyptians all the way, also in Cairo, about all the issues, about the deal with Hamas, and of course their concern regarding the civilians in Gaza. We have to remind here that the Arab world want that this model of Hamas to lose the game. They know that the Hamas model is a threat to the regimes, and of course, while they are loyal much more to the the Iranian interest, and it's a betrayal of the Arab countries. But after all, apparently, they have to play the game. They have to tell the public opinion that they pay attention for the locals in Gaza, and they do, not more than IDF is trying to avoid hurting civilians in Gaza Strip. I believe that there is still a room for IDF to act, because Rafah, the southern city in Gaza Strip, is a big space, is a big place. It's overpopulated on the one hand, but Israel knows, and we could see that last night, how still to find the way for action and to put its hand on the commanders from the other side, and they try to continue this foothold in that part, although it's a bit complicated.
Indeed. Well, we're hopeful, of course, that the extrication of additional hostages would be successful in the very near future. But with that in our mind, I'd like to ask you, Mr. Oren, is Israel's aspiration, on the one hand, to rescue or release, but naturally rescue the hostages from the Gaza Strip, conflicting to a certain degree with Jerusalem's objectives to achieve victory over Hamas by eradicating this Islamist terrorist organization from the Gaza Strip?
So, of course, victory depends on the definition that you attach to it. If you say that getting all the hostages back, or those who remain alive, and you achieve it, then you won. If, as Netanyahu did the other day, if you define victory by the dismantlement of the last remaining 4 battalions, if you don't achieve that, if you achieve only, let's say, 2.5 out of the 4, is that a victory? Almost a victory? It is not total victory, but it could be victory. This is a philosophical debate. The question will be, first of all, how does the Israeli population, the Israeli electorate, feel about it? Is there a common sigh of relief here? Many of the hostages are back. Many of the Hamas leaders and fighters have been eliminated. We all understand that in life there are no complete achievements, but is it good enough? Is it a major achievement or only a minor one? This we will see only when the ceasefire starts. And apparently each side is now trying to use the remaining time until there is such a deal to its best advantage. Yahya Sinwar hopes that they will not get to him, his pursuers, before the ceasefire, and that they will not rescue more hostages. Well, Israel, of course, has the opposite aim. So each day which passes before the deal, before the ceasefire, may get the IDF closer to Sinwar, but it will all be for nothing if at the end he is not captured and no other hostages are being rescued or released.
Indeed. Well, General Sofrin, I'd like to ask you particularly, and I'd like to read three short quotes, namely by Iranian Foreign Minister Hossein Amir Abdullahian, who visited both Beirut and Damascus the last day and a half. And he says as follows: in the past 4 months during this war, there was an exchange of messages between Iran and America. One of the things stated is the messages asked Iran what Iran's demands are for Hezbollah not to get fully involved in this war against Israel. And then the last one is any step that the Zionist regime takes towards a widespread attack on Lebanon will be Netanyahu's last day and ends the status quo in the region. What do you make out of those things? What was the demand that the Iranians ultimately posed to the Americans in this equation, if at all? And to what degree is a scenario in which we'll start seeing leaders of states getting targeted by enemy regimes for the purpose of deliberately disrupting the state from its functions?
First of all, I think that when they refer to Netanyahu, or Prime Minister Netanyahu, they don't really mean him personally. They believe that, or they're referring to Israel, but namely, they're speaking about the Prime Minister because he's the head of the state. But the reference is Israel. It's not a person. It's not Netanyahu personally. Now, when you look at the relations between Iran and the U.S., the U.S. sent, at the beginning of this war, sent here 2 groups of carriers to the Middle East and signaled Iran and signaled Hezbollah not to escalate the situation and not to launch a wide war against Israel from the northern front. Now, the Iranians are orchestrating all this, let's say, multi-arena fighting that Israel is in the midst of. That means the Houthis from Yemen, the pro-Iranian militias from backed Iranian militias from Syria and from Iraq, and of course Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hamas in Lebanon as well. And of course the attempts to ignite, in a way, the fire in the northern part of Samaria by groups of Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, of course directed by Iran, to establish there the capabilities. And I remind that when Khamenei met Ismail Haniyeh and Salah Haruri, who passed away for unnatural reasons, in Tehran, he told them that Israel will be defeated from Judea and Samaria. That's what he called it the key point. Now, to that extent, Iran is controlling the flames, the height of the flames, in a way, even though each one of the organizations has its own agenda and its own limitations, and is acting upon that, and not according to what Iran is directing him immediately. Okay? Now, regarding Hezbollah doesn't have any intentions now to escalate the situation with Israel and to launch a wide war, due to 2 reasons. The first one, he's considering himself to be a Lebanese organization, meaning he has his Lebanese identity and he cares about what happens in Lebanon and what will be the outcomes in Lebanon, unlike what happens in Gaza, when Hamas leaders don't really care about the Palestinians. They call them refugees and should be handled by the UN and not by us. We're not responsible for their future. And second, the issue is that Iran is telling Hezbollah from the beginning of this war that your main role is to engage Israel in a case of deterioration between Israel and Iran. And we are not going to waste all the capabilities that we built for you in Lebanon for these Palestinians in Gaza. Now, Hezbollah is playing what we call on some low profile. He set up his own equation of engaging Israeli positions, military positions along the borderline between Israel and Lebanon. And if we hit residents in Lebanon, he's hitting back residents in Israel, and so on. This is the equation. But he doesn't use his own arsenal. He doesn't escalate the war. And the Iranians are controlling that. And the Iranians are aware, of course, that the US has the capability to launch an attack if needed. And second, of course, they know that Israel is going to has the ability to retaliate in case they will launch a wider war with Israel. And so, if I want to sum up, Iran is actually controlling the whole area. It is discussing the issues with the US, but looking at the strategic level, eye to eye, not from looking at somebody from below as if he's taller than him and stronger than him.
Indeed. Well, I'd like to refer to it as the campaign of saving face when we're talking about Hezbollah's low-intensity war with Israel. But Colonel Wehbe, I'd like to ask you particularly about a statement made by Sheikh Daifullah Rassam from Yemen. He is the Tadhamoon tribal council chief, which basically coordinates all of the various tribes under the umbrella of the Houthis. He said as follows: America entered the war now, and we consider every day a celebration. We mourn martyrs, or destroy ships, or confront America and Israel. To what degree does Israel feel that it is engaged in this war, considering the international maritime task force on the one hand, Task Force 153 under the U.S. leadership, as well as the separate task force that the Americans have established together with the United Kingdom, with the Netherlands, Canada, Australia, and to a reference of infrastructure to Bahrain. To what degree is this truly the main front of the engagement against this Iranian proxy? And is it smart for Israel to stay out of this game?
Yeah, we can watch right now in the current situation that a new political order, regionally speaking, and if you want also internationally speaking, is evolving. And each player here on the ground can try to promote their interest. The Houthis is one of them. He is on the one hand a very interesting local Yemeni player and actor. On the other hand, they are also related to this Iranian ecosystem as a proxy, as we consider them, of Iran. After all, there is inside Iman itself the internal crisis between Aden and Sana'a, between the Sunnis and the Houthis that are considered much more Shiite group than a Sunni revisionist Islamic group. It's internal. Externally, they are trying to exploit the current situation in order to maximize their benefit from this open war. And one of them is controlling, of course, the sea, the Red Sea, close to their coast. I think that they are acting locally on the one hand, and they are acting regionally on the other hand. At the moment that they start to lose from this coalition with Iran, they maybe will choose to shift to a local interest politics, where the rest of the world can maybe pay attention for their interest, and little by little they will get rid from this hold of the sea and the Red Sea. Yes, we have to take them into account, and very much. And I'm afraid that Egypt is losing much more than Israel at the current time. We know that the economy in Egypt is very bad. There is a shortage in foreign currency, for example, in dollars. and it's related very much to the behavior of the Houthis, preventing the ships from passing through the Red Sea and then through Suez. The Houthis are a very clear example of sub-national actor, a transnational one that is acting there and influencing everybody on the region. There are much more subnational actors that are influencing right now the politics than some of the states in the Middle East, like Jordan, for example, which is not involved right now in the current politics. And it will be a very big question how to deal with those actors later on. Of course, I expect after the next election in the US, we will see who will be the winner, who will get into the White House in the next January, and maybe a new stage in the Middle East will start.
Well, this is all the time that we have for today. I'd like to thank Colonel Wehbe, General Sofrin, as well as General Gavish, who had to step away from the program, and, of course, Mr. Oren. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank all of you at home as well. Until our next update from here in Jerusalem. Shalom.
My name is Doron Gavish, and my background 30 years of serving in the Israeli Air Force. My last job I was the commander of the Israeli Air and Missile Defense during the introduction of the Iron Dome to the defense of Israel. All of this allows me really to be part of the team here in TV7. It is super important to have such a platform. We talk about the global situation, we talk about Israel and those different angles which are relevant to the discussion.